Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about the evolution of hybrid and multi-cloud IT environments and how this evolution changes the way businesses should manage their applications. To discuss that, I'm joined by a major industry thought leader. With me is Chad Dunn, Vice President of Product Management for Dell Apex. Chad, happy Friday to you, and thanks for joining us today.
Happy Friday to you, and I'm very excited to be here.
So I think that companies struggle with multi-cloud and cloud management in general these days. I mean, we obviously cloud is very established, but I think it still has not gotten easy for companies in a lot of ways. And in fact, if anything, it might be more complicated than ever as cloud continues to grow and grow in its tool sets. You've talked about that. You've talked about the idea of optionality in IT and why that's so critical for cloud experiences. What do you mean by optionality in IT?
Well, you're right that cloud has been established. It's simply a fact, and it is a multi-cloud world. And the reason being is you've had this sort of tension of developers finding the best of breed services wherever they can, whether that's in hyperscalers or whether that's on their own gear in their own data centers. And so if you look at optionality, it means different things, whether you're a developer or whether you're an IT organization. Now, to a developer, they've got a plethora of new services that allow them to innovate much more quickly, whether it's AI ML services, or whether it's speech to text, or whether it's database services, or services that we haven't heard of, right? Just go into your cloud console and down that left-hand side of the screen, pull down all the services that are available. It's really impressive. So, these folks are like kids in a candy store with all these services they can use to develop on. Now, when we look at the optionality afforded to the IT organization, it's a different story, right? So when they look at this, they see optionality a little bit more through the constraint lens. How do I govern those applications? How do I secure those applications? How do I adhere to data sovereignty? How do I deal with data gravity? What are compliance and privacy issues associated with this? So you certainly got this tension of developers who see all these amazing tools that they can use, and they want to run fast, hard, and they want to innovate their hearts out. And then you've got IT saying, well, not so fast, because we've got to secure, we've got to make it safe, and we've got to govern it. So we've certainly set up some healthy tension between those two audiences.
Well, so you're talking about optionality, you mean really the menu of choices, the menu of tool sets, so to speak, they can use to do their job.
That's really it. Look, you're a kid, you go into a buffet and you see every food that you can imagine, and then your parents say, well, you can only have these 5 things, and
right.
3 of them are mashed potatoes. So
I want hot dogs and mashed potatoes and pot roast. I want it all. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, all right, given that, so with the market so highly focused on hybrid and multi-cloud, I mean, what is the mind shift taking place today among developers? You talk about the optionality, so it's really them making the most of the optionality?
Yeah, it is the developers that are making the most of it, and a lot of times we see our customers have become multi-cloud by default, simply because under the radar, so to speak, these developers have found the services that they need. They found the tools and the development environments they need to innovate. And oftentimes those are in different hyperscalers, and sometimes even cross hyperscalers. And now IT is at a stage where they love the innovation that comes out of these organizations. But how do we exercise some level of control and governance? How do we keep ourselves out of trouble in this?
Quick interruption on it, if I may. Sometimes the innovation actually works against us. We like the innovation, but it also causes sometimes as many problems as it does, potential benefits.
I'll tell you a really quick story. I was working with a European bank a few years ago, and I would say they were one of the most advanced financial organizations I'd ever met. Literally, the people that are building the banking applications are doing Agile. They're having stand-ups every day. They have Scrum teams and the Post-its on the glass walls. I mean, it was not like any other bank I had ever seen. They had embraced this, fully. Then it's really up to IT to be able to adapt to that level of velocity, the amount of tools, the amount of code and things that they're going to bring into these environments. And traditionally, IT has not been set up to sort of take that deluge of new tools, new IP, new ways of doing things, and still be able to, make it secure, make it comply, adhere to things like GDPR. It's a challenge for them.
All right, so I may have interrupted you. You're talking about the mind shift taking place among developers. Part of it is the challenge of those many tools. What else does that optionality involve in terms of the mindset shift?
Well, I think it has a massive effect on the IT organization, right? They've got to understand, how am I going to service this innovation? Because at the end of the day, as a company, we all like it, right? If it's Dell, whether it's Dell IP, Dell developers, at the Dell level, we love innovation and we want to drive it as quickly as we can. And we're not unlike every other company out there that deals with these situations.
Mhm.
So it is driving a change in the mindset of the IT organization, and they're sort of hungry for tools that allow them to satisfy both of those things. And at Dell, what we've largely tried to focus on is two really key concepts around that we call ground to cloud and cloud to ground. So
Okay.
I talk about ground to cloud, talking about really the data, right? What are the data services and the data capabilities that I've had on premises that I'm used to operating, I'm used to dealing with, that I can replicate, I can back up, I can secure. But if I want to make those available to workloads that are outside of my premises, outside of my four walls, whether it's in co-location or whether it's in a hyperscaler, I need a way to do that. And that gets to things that we do like Project Alpine, where we're putting our own software-based storage endpoints out in public cloud and allowing users to move the data back and forth. So that's sort of the ground to cloud strategy. And the second one, and it gets to this cloud native development methodology,
Mhm.
because the services are so rich, varied, and valuable to the developers, wouldn't it be great with some of those services actually be run on the customer's premises, on IT's premises, giving them the ability to secure, ensure compliance, inspect, audit, et cetera, and have some level of confidence that they're not in violation of compliance, they're not taking risk. So picture taking some of those AI ML or speech to text or HPC capabilities, running them within the four walls of their data center, or running those within the confines of their co-location. So you want to get to a point where you as an IT organization can provide that nearly infinite optionality to your developers, but then behind the scenes, where it runs doesn't matter so much as long as it runs. And that finally sort of ties back, and I don't know if you remember, there used to be like the ONSI cloud native haiku test,
Right.
and specific developer at Pivotal who said, here's my source code, run it in the cloud, I don't care how. And that's it. And that's the way our developers think. Look, clearly there's a generation of developers out there right now who have never touched a server and probably never will, right? The extent of their infrastructure is a laptop and a mouse,
Right.
and maybe a mouse, right?
The birth of serverless, absolutely, and really the rise of cloud native, which I think a lot, and this may be a tangent, but it may be worth taking a moment on. The idea of cloud native is obviously very, big, and companies aspire to it. What is your sense of the adoption of cloud native? It feels to me still a minority of businesses that are really cloud native out there.
Well, there's the ones that are born in the cloud, and there you sort of set them in a specific category. So
Right.
they're built from the cloud up. Then you sort of get these other more mature businesses who have a lot of workloads, a lot of applications. And as they look at the economics of how they leverage cloud, it could be driven two ways. It could be, hey, we as the IT organization or application owners, we see definite benefit into moving into public cloud, into hyperscalers. Or it comes down from the CIO that said, we need to be in public cloud. And I've seen that a lot of times where it gets down to, the architecture teams are like, okay, we've got to be in public cloud. What does that mean? I don't know, but we better get there pretty quickly. And
Right.
you'll sort of see not the most efficient transitions, like lift and shift the VM into public cloud. What have I really done? Not much,
Right.
right? But often what we'll see is they'll bring in a consulting firm and they'll look at their universe of applications and say, okay, what makes sense to stay on-prem and or to stay packaged as a physical application or as a VM? What makes sense to refactor into cloud native or just move as a VM? And by the way, while we're at it, which ones should we be rationalizing out? We as an industry, we're pretty bad at retiring applications
Right.
inside enterprises, but that point at which you look at where workloads need to be placed, that's an opportunity to do some level of rationalization. Now, I think that what we've seen from that sort of top down, thou shalt go public cloud,
Mhm.
we've seen a lot of companies rush there and put workloads there. and then they exist there for a couple of years. And after a couple of years of invoices, they say, geez, maybe public cloud wasn't the right place, or maybe this application wasn't the right place for public cloud, because very often public cloud is going to be the right answer. But for those workloads that don't really fit there, those tend to chew up a lion's share of the invoice every month. And I think there's a little bit of sticker shock. And so we are certainly starting to see, and you've seen many articles written recently about the sticker shock, 2-3 years into public cloud. Maybe we should be a little more sophisticated about what goes into public cloud and what goes somewhere else. Whether it's in a colo where I have latency adjacency to the public cloud, or whether it goes all the way back onto my premises.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to me. I've heard the word repatriation more the last couple of years, where companies are actually moving workloads back in-house, which I'm pretty shocked about. I mean, it's not a huge trend, but it is a not insignificant trend. And I never thought that move would have taken place back in 2012, 2014. Looking ahead, I never would have thought, like, well, companies are going to be migrating from the cloud back to the data center. But indeed, it's happening for exactly the reasons you're talking about. To zoom up from that issue, I'd like to get your sense. What is your advice to software developers, and of course the companies that manage them, as they lean in on optionality? What do you recommend?
Software developers need to continue to push the envelope in terms of innovation, right? You folks, you men and women, are the innovation engines for your company, right? This is where the new ideas are coming from. Mm-hmm. Vendors and IT organizations, our job is to make your job as easy as possible through the tools, through the innovation, through the capabilities that we provide. So, hey, keep doing what you're doing, do more of it. Let us stretch stretch the public cloud providers, stretch your IT organizations. We always want to be in a position where the concept of where something runs is inhibiting the rate of innovation.
Interesting. I want to make sure we touch on a topic which I find really interesting: the idea of Dell Apex itself, and it's worth drilling down. I think about Dell Apex as a multi-cloud management tool. I know it does more than that. Can you talk a bit about Dell Apex itself, what it's doing, why a company would choose Dell Apex?
Absolutely. So there's a few facets to Dell Apex, and it depends on how you're engaged with it as to how you see it. So Dell Apex is the platform, the SaaS platform, by which many of our software as a service assets will run. You'll access them, you'll manage them from there, from deployment to day 2 to day N. So when I talked about things like our storage cloud endpoints that we've discussed, or management of our multi-cloud appliance, we've talked about things like VxRail, and we've talked about things like Raven, the collaboration with Red Hat. At the same time, many of our own infrastructure services are available there and can be managed there. So you'll be able to manage your file, block, object, compute resources from a single point. But also importantly, you can manage the commerce through Dell there as well. So we want Apex to not only be day 2 management, or not only be commerce, but we want it to be the Dell experience for commerce, for day 2 management, monitoring, expansion, etc. So if you look underneath, what's really in the Apex environment, it is a fairly substantial SaaS environment running in Kubernetes with a number of microservices that in utilities that many groups around Dell will leverage to bring their intellectual property to market. So we see it from that perspective as an accelerant to get to this software-centric market, to get to a SaaS market and manage our multi-cloud assets, while at the same time providing new financial mechanisms for customers to consume, whether it's a straight rate card subscription or whether it's metered consumption of hardware resources. We want you to be able to consume wherever you are, however you are, manage it from within that Apex console.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Chad, I think you said it. A lot of interesting stuff. It's going to be a really fascinating sector to follow in the years ahead. Thanks for sharing your experience today, and come back and talk with us again sometime.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun.